to show you how to fill out a research chart and how to also read something quite difficult. Okay? Now I've put a few things on here as reminders for, these are habits that you should be using, you should be accessing when you're reading something difficult. Firstly, in order to make something unfamiliar make sense, you have to make it more familiar. And to do that, you have to figure out how is it structured, how are the ideas ordered, are there images, who's writing it, and so on. So look at the titles, the headings, and the subheadings first, just like we did yesterday with that document. Then you want to read the parts that have bigger font, because sometimes those mean, that means that they're more important, right? And then when you have the smaller text, maybe you don't, if the document is 100 pages, maybe you don't read all of it. You just read the sections that matter to you, that seem most relevant to you. So you have to make a guess, is this going to be relevant to me? If you're super interested in it, read the whole thing. But if you don't have enough time to do that, and I imagine not many of us do, you want to read the stuff that's most relevant to your question. Because the focus question is the thing we're trying to answer. Is that clear? Okay, so make sure when you read that text, you read it slowly. Actively, you should be, Mustafa, pay attention, you should be making notes on a piece of paper of keywords or key parts that you think, oh, this seems like an important thing, I'm going to come back to that later. Okay? So look for the keywords in your question or stuff like that. And then if you need to use dictionaries, use those translating tools to take stuff, but to make stuff make sense. But don't overuse them. Do not rely on them, because translators are just using algorithms to translate things. Often, especially in academic writing, which is really hard, lots of meaning will be missing because it's just trying to translate word by word. Okay? And metaphors and things like that might simply fall, not be understood by the computer. So you can only really use this to a certain extent. Don't over-rely on them, otherwise you're not even going to build your skill of reading in English, which is the point of being here, isn't it? Yeah? Okay, so any questions about these skills that I'm going to be expecting you to use? You develop these, by the way, by practicing it. And this actually applies to any language. Okay? But you practice this over and over again, which I'm trying to get you to do here, and you will develop. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to fill out this sheet, okay? By reading this document here. Remember this? So, physician-assisted dying. Let's remind ourselves that for this practice, we're going to be talking about euthanasia. So, over here, why and how do some support groups support euthanasia? I've put in my first focus question. Is this visible clearly on the phone?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So the source address I just put from the EPIC database, because if you copy paste the URL from EPIC, it actually won't work. So just make sure you have the title and the author correctly identified there. And you can usually find the title and the author. Obviously the title will be at the top, and then the author, in this case, is actually at the bottom here. It tells you who he is, and actually this is going to be really important in a moment when we do the second part, the perspective part. So, relevant information that answers the question. This part, we have to make sure, is there something in this source that is answering the question? And to hunt that out, you actually should be reading, firstly, the titles, the subheadings, which we did yesterday, and then some of these bigger parts over here. Now, this quote, I actually really like. From an ethical point of view, the act of assistance under the carefully prescribed conditions can be considered beneficial to the patient. Beneficial is a positive word. So this person is pro-euthanasia. They think it's okay. It says that the act of assistance, okay, the act of what's it called? Physician-assisted dying, euthanasia, under specific conditions, can be considered beneficial to the patient. It can be considered compassionate and a respect of their autonomy. So this guy is pro-euthanasia, and I can copy this quote here because it actually tells me, here's what he thinks. Okay? So this is relevant. Notice how when I put quotes in here, I put quotes in quote marks. Okay? So make sure you put this in quote marks so that you can distinguish it from your own writing. And what I would do over here is say Jack, what's his name? Jack Havel believes. I'm going to rewrite some of it in my own words in order to process it. That's part of that other skill I was telling you over here. Annotate it, make notes, rewrite it in your own words so that you actually understand what it means. Okay? So Havel believes that it is that euthanasia is a positive thing for the patient, an act of kindness. Because he says it's a compassionate act. Okay? So, that's one quote. Is there more relevant information in this source? Well, there might be. I've only literally read that. And what you would have to do is to read some more of it and take some more information from there. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to do that. Okay? Because it's boring sitting here watching me do it when you have to be the one doing this thinking. Okay? So, what I just wanted to emphasize is that you're going to make sure you're taking quotes that answers the information, that answers this question here, your focus question. If it does not answer the focus question, don't include it here. Okay? Because it's not relevant. Cool? This part doesn't have to be long. I would say 2 to 3 quotes plus your notes or paraphrases in here is enough for that part. Are we clear with the relevant information?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So I'm just going to write here as a note, include 2 to 3 quotes plus your notes and paraphrasing. Okay. Now, this perspectives part is very important. This is about, is there a person in the source who has a perspective, pro or anti, and what do they believe? Why do they believe in that particular thing? So, is there one person who has a pro or anti perspective in this source? Yeah, it's actually the author. The author. What's his name again? It's Jack Havel. Now, is this just some random guy that walked off the street? No. How do you find out who he is?
Search his name.
So you can search his name, Jack Havel. Okay? Oh, he's actually a vet, according to this source over here. He is a... If I find his name, hold on. Jack Havel. He's a veteran medical specialist. Veteran meaning that he has a lot of experience. Okay? And actually, this is one way of finding out who he is, and that's awesome. Okay? There is another way, in that in the document he's in the academic journal, because this is, I stole this off the EPIC database, it will actually give you, if it's an academic journal, it'll give you the credentials and information of the author. So over here, I might be able to zoom in carefully, it tells you that he is a retired intensive care medicine specialist. He was a director of the Waikato Intensive Care Unit for 26 years. Is that a lot of experience?
Oh.
Yep. And he was the dean of the blah, 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 blah. Okay? He's also currently the president of the Voluntary Euthanasia Society of New Zealand. So is he pro-euthanasia?
Yeah.
Yep, he is. He's 100% pro. So, I'm going to just copy that title over here. So Jack Havel, who is the president of the Voluntary Euthanasia Society of New Zealand. So you want to be able to describe who they are and if they belong to a particular group. Okay? Then, what do they believe and why? This is where you kind of describe their opinion connected to the topic. So, Jack Havel believes that euthanasia should be legalized because it benefits the patient involved. Remember how I used the word because there? You should use the word because to explain your thinking. Now, I can obviously just say he thinks it's a compassionate act and respectful of their autonomy. So over here, I can quote him. he says it is a, and then open quote, compassionate act and respectful of their autonomy. Does that make sense? So if I use a quote in here, is that allowed?
Yes.
Yep. It's allowed because it is actually using their words and then you're explaining it. That's what I want. Use their words and explain their thinking. Now, what social actions, number 3, have they taken related to the topic? How have they shared with other people why is it that their point of view is worth having? Or why should euthanasia be legalized? How am I going to convince you, Mike, Hugo, to have you, everybody else? Okay? Jack Havel has done something. What do you think he's done? Kyle? He has written an article. Absolutely. Jack has written an academic article explaining the reasons why euthanasia should be made legal and why it is more safe than not. That's actually sort of what the article says. Obviously, to know that, you have to read the whole article, but I have actually done it, just not in this video, because it takes time. Yeah? Okay, now, what do you think their values are? So now we're going to go deeper into this. By the way, this guy might have done other things too, and if you can find out, like if he's the president of the, what's it called, of the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, he's probably done other things, and you can look up Jack Havel Voluntary Euthanasia Society. You can find out some of the things that they do over here. Because look, he's actually been arguing about it for a while. He's written this article in the New Zealand Herald in 2018, so he's been talking about it for a while. That's why Googling him is a good idea to find out what else they've said. So you can write here, Jack has also written pro-euthanasia articles in the NZ Herald to reach a wider public. Because when you write an academic journal, an article in an academic journal, it's not going to reach that many people. Because this source, for example, is behind, it's in a database. People are not going to access it that much. But a New Zealand Herald article, a quick Google and it's there. Okay? So he's reaching a wider public by doing that. If you're able to recognize that and write about that, that's a good thing. But of course there's other things that he might have protested. He might have created a website and advertised something. I don't know. It depends on your particular situation. So look them up and find out some actions they've taken. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yep? Okay. Now, their values. Based on their social actions, briefly explain what's important to the group or person. So when you think about values, what do you think is important to this guy? He says that it's important to be, I'm just going off this one quote, okay? So, it's beneficial to the patient, a compassionate act and respectful of their autonomy. So, in my mind, he definitely values the autonomy of human beings. People being able to make their own decisions and be independent. Right? That's something he values. Okay? He values, what else do you think he values?
Human rights.
He also values human rights. And why do you think that, Wishan?
Because of freedom of getting help.
Because freedom to get euthanasia, to be euthanized, is a human right according to him. At least it's the freedom to make that decision. Okay? Freedom to decide. Oops, I wrote this device. Decide. Okay, now the last one. What ideology seems to inform their actions? So when you look at this thing here, remember this?
Yep.
Yep. So this document, there's actually a little link here that says their worldview. And what you should do is identify what their worldview is and explain briefly why they would hold that. So there's all this information here that you can use about what are they like more conservative, more open to change, are they liberal, are they fascist, communist, so on. Now, what do you think this guy is? Where do you think he falls if he's wanting to kind of make this change in society?
Freedom.
so he's more towards freedom. So he's actually advocating for individuals making their own decision. Therefore, that's the liberal side of things. Okay? So you could say he seems to have a liberal ideology because he is interested in equipping other people with the knowledge through the articles that he creates to make their own decisions about their own fate, their own life and death situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why I've mentioned the ideology and I've explained it using the word because. Okay. If you can do this, you're sweet. Okay? Already this is happily passing. Happily. Okay? If you want to go beyond achieved, all you really have to do is to make sure that these things in here are explained more thoroughly. Okay? I'm not going to do that for this video because it just takes it takes a bit more time and thinking, and obviously you might want to come and add things as time goes on to these source charts that you've created. But the last thing I want to do is just talk a little bit about the last part. This is essential. You have to show that you can analyze and evaluate sources. So, Abdi, you should be focusing on me. Okay? I get that this is somewhat boring, but you need to be focusing on this so you grab the skills, yeah?
Yes.
So, how current is the source? Gosh, we have to find the date of the source. Not that one. How do we find the date of the source? Oh, it says here, August 2015. So you got to find the year.
And the day.
If you can't find the date, that's fine. So long as you find a year, that's good enough. Take what they provide. August 2015. What is the purpose of the source? Who is its audience? How is it meant to affect them? So, who do you think this is aimed at? If it's in an academic journal. The academic journal is called Policy Quarterly. So one way to find out who the audience is to Google Policy Quarterly, New Zealand, and just read a little bit more about it. So it is a free, it tells you what it is. It's a free public policy journal, co-produced by something to do with the government and Victoria University. Okay? So indeed, it is it's something that the public should have access to, right? So you should be able to recognize that. And in here you would write what is it called? The Policy Quarterly? Sorry, so the article inside the Policy Quarterly is aimed at a wide-ranging public because it's available online, but particularly